What do you do these days?
I'm finishing up my undergraduate at Lewis University in Romeoville.
Oh,
It's about
okay.
3 hours north of here.
Okay. Good. Speed. All right. What's the specialization?
Um, Bachelor's in air traffic control. So
Oh,
hopefully
okay.
to exploit the slowly trickling out of the controller field into the FAA. So hopefully that'll work out.
I'll ask you more about that later. I'm a private pilot.
Okay,
Okay.
that'll work out.
Excellent. Good. Good to go. I'm good. Okay. Well, Bobby, thanks for doing this. We really appreciate it.
Oh,
It's
thank
nice to meet you and your wife.
Thank you for having us.
How did you first get to know Rob Miller?
I met Rob probably our freshman year of high school. Near the end of the freshman year, we were in separate high schools, but we co-opted in gymnastics. I had been cut from baseball, so I decided to take a different route, and a much more drastic route it was. And didn't really know Rob my freshman year, but as our sophomore and junior year developed, we started developing a friendship and got to know each other well. And then obviously our other group of friends hung out with each other. So once we finished high school, we split separate ways. I went to the service, and he did a year at University of Iowa. It wasn't until I came home on my first mid-tour leave, probably about a year and a half in, is when he told me that he's probably not going to go back his sophomore year of college, that he's going to take the service route. So it kind of surprised me, but I didn't. Again, I wasn't. We were keeping in touch by email and by phone, but didn't really see it coming. So the fact that he chose the most difficult route into the Army didn't surprise me. I knew his talents in gymnastics. I knew his talent physically and mentally and emotionally. So whether he could do it or not was obviously a test, but he cleaned house, if you will, with that talent. He did exceptionally well.
What were the kind of qualities he had as a person when you first got to know him that, maybe served him well later on in life and what he was doing?
Hands down, his physical ability, his agility, his ability to pick up on a technique, exploit that, and then get better at it, or vice versa. He's just a powerhouse, especially in gymnastics. Something that takes years to develop took him under a year. Something that takes years to get into well and develop as a leader on the captain on the varsity team, and took him under a year. He developed that role quickly as a sophomore because our club wasn't as populated as we wanted it to be. So he had to fill the ranks quickly, and he did that with hands down, probably to the best of his ability, and much better than most of us could at his age. It wasn't until our senior year that I kind of started mimicking him. I realized the potential that he had. I kind of matured at that point, but he had done that years beforehand, so it was almost like living vicariously through him. And I did that even more as I was in the service, getting out while he was still in, just a year before he was killed. But to answer your question, physically, it was just a physically gifted person who exploited that talent into the special operations.
What about his leadership abilities? You kind of touched on that a little bit, but he seemed to have some natural qualities there as well.
Yeah, hands down, his leadership ability was bar none. It was something you don't see at that age group, at that age level. As a sophomore, junior, and into a senior year, it just got better and better. I was introduced to that role as a senior, so I didn't really have anything to fall back onto, whereas he, as a sophomore, knew what he was already doing, how to lead the team. He wasn't just a pointer and then do that. It was more of a pointer and showing how to do something. My experiences in his leadership, minus in the military, was strictly just based on how well we could perform as a team, and he led the way for that. So he wasn't just a pointer. He spoke words, and then he showed how to do it physically.
Which service were you in?
Him and I were in the Army, so we both share the same.
Oh, okay. You said you didn't see it coming necessarily that he was going to quit school and go into the Army, but at the same time, it wasn't really a terribly big surprise.
Right. It wasn't a big surprise because I knew his gifts and I knew his talents, and I knew they would be served well in another field. The fact that I didn't keep up with him as often as we did in high school after high school was kind of what surprised me the most, was because I expected him to continue through college, because their family is academically gifted, and I never saw Rob backing away from something like school. But when I found out he was going that route, I mean, I immediately shunned that away and expected probably the best to come out of him from that, from his volunteering to go to selection, and then obviously into the Q course, and then into the teams.
Yeah, it sounds like because of his background, and as you say, the family was very talented intellectually and behaviorally. He was going to do well. He rose pretty quickly through the ranks, from what I hear.
He did. I joke with Maureen, his mother, that what I did in 5 years, he did in under 2. It was almost like I'm now becoming more. I'm living through him vicariously. I'm living through what he did, even though I've done some of it, not all of it, but I did a little bit to where I thought I would be. And he got ahead of me quickly. It was a fast track to promotion for him. So what took me a few years took him just a few months. So.
Did you keep in touch with him while he was when he did his first tour in Afghanistan?
Yeah, we emailed back and forth. I was nearing the end of my first deployment when he deployed the first time, and I continued our correspondence through email. Every now and then I would get a phone call when I was at home, but nothing to the extent of a 20 or 30-minute phone call. It was strictly just how's it going, but majority of it was through email.
Could you get a sense of how he felt he was doing, or the importance of what he was doing over there? Could you speak to that?
Going through my deployment, I know the circumstances behind what you say and what you do are two different things. So I can read between the lines, and reading through between the lines in the email, in between our emails, I kind of smirked, and then I understand. It was one of those. I kind of understand what you're doing. It was mostly just, we're doing great. You can't tell them where they're at, but nonetheless, I knew he was in Afghanistan and I was in Iraq, so there's two different mindsets. But knowing my background and what I was doing with my family, I could read between the lines on what he was doing, kind of with his family and maybe with me. But there's some things that he can disclose more than I could, more than he could do to his family, because we can both kind of understand where each other are coming from.
Was he proud of what he was doing?
100%. Hands down, it was a job that he had probably would have picked if he could have picked it his freshman year of high school, because he had it in him in gymnastics. It was just a matter of time before the dogs came out of him. But gifted again, physically and emotionally and mentally, knowing that he can put up with more and tolerate more at his age group than most of his peers could, probably set him above everybody else at the time. Very few people can just sign up, go through the course and the pipeline, and actually make it into a team in the amount of time he did. And he proved that, and he's one of those small statistics that you don't really hear about. So,
obviously, when you heard that he'd been killed, it was probably a horrible shock. Could you tell me how you learned about it?
I learned when Maureen phoned me. It was I was home about almost a year. I was out of the service, and she had called. I had missed her phone call. She left a voicemail on my parents' home answering machine, and then I ended up calling her back right away. She explained to me what had happened. The situation behind how he was killed was really unclear. We just knew that it was a firefight. It was a really bad situation they had gotten into, and then the details started trickling down after that, weeks later. We feared the worst, that he was killed in an IED explosion, which I had seen and experienced. So I didn't put it past him that that's what happened. But knowing the story and the results and the reports weeks after the fact started making things more come into light. What happened, what the teams were actually doing over there, what he was doing. I kind of was naive to the situation, but when the reports came out, it was, I don't want to say an aha, yeah, that makes sense, but it kind of did, and it helped personally. It helped me grieve that it wasn't just quick. It wasn't just that's what happened in the news, and the next day's news was, yesterday's news was history. It was, this is something that's going to sit on the table for a while. That kind of helped me with the grieving process, and then eventually hearing from the teams. Specific individuals saying that they're around because of him, it kind of just laid everything to rest for me. Time is really helping out, but events like this for tonight and the Hall of Fame award for him, that's a really big deal for our family. I considered him to be like a brother. When I found out he was killed, it was there wasn't anybody else that I had grown up with that we mirrored each other almost to a T. So it hit hard.
when you started to hear, as you say, the pieces come together about what happened and the kind of initiative that he took, you know, he could have just stayed back behind and stayed under cover and he would have done his job, you know, from what I can tell. But given what he did, were you surprised about it when you started to think it all through?
No. You know, when I begin to hear the reports, more accurate reports, and how I can put pieces together, some of the videos that the government and the Department of Defense have put together, I begin to piece together, in my opinion, maybe what had happened, what was going through his mind when things were going south quickly. The fact that he needed to create wide space for his team to move out because of Captain Cusick getting hit, because of other members of the team either being wounded or needing cover quickly. Rob saw the situation, did not question it, sized it up to the best of his ability, and moved out with a purpose with it, and made the action possible. That does not surprise me at all. There's a part of me that feels that there was not carelessness involved, but there was a sense of, this has to happen, and if it doesn't, it will get worse quickly. And that was almost the better of the two evils. It's more of a crass way of looking at it, but I don't know how else to really explain it. It is what it is, and what happened. But what happened was the better of the two situations that he had sized up, and he saw what was in front of him. I know for sure he saw what was in front of him.
It was entirely possible that everybody could have been wiped out.
Sure. There is an entire ODA team and Afghan National Army soldiers that are alive today because of him, and not just one or two, an entire team's worth. And it's very befitting on the award. Being at the White House for the ceremony was probably the biggest honor that I ever had as a member of the military and as a civilian. Being a part of that, just knowing my friend is a part of history. There are textbooks now that will have his name next to Audie Murphy and Alan Lynch and Bob Howard. You know, it's not the Derek Jeters, it's the other people that make a real difference, and Rob is one of them.
What do you hope that future generations, your generation and the others to follow, and all of ours, what do you hope that people will take away from Rob's sacrifice, from his character? You know, what could other people learn from him that would do honor to his memory?
His character, it developed as a young kid, I'm sure, in his family growing up. The character that I saw was exposed 100% in high school. It wasn't something that was shadowed. It wasn't something that was kept behind closed doors. It was strictly who he was. This is how I am, and if you cannot deal with it, get out. It wasn't abrasive, but it was to an extent where if you can't be around it, then you're not going to get any better. And I'm sure that came out with the teams, and I'm sure the teams made him do the same. His character will always live on in my mind, knowing who he was. For somebody who doesn't know Rob, his story, in and of itself on paper, will explain the kind of person he is. Very selfless, looking out for others, and it's not about yourself. It's about the person behind you and to the left and right for him.
How has knowing him changed your own life?
I was asked this in 2010 when we did the other interviews for DOD, and the first thing I said was I'm eternally grateful for knowing Rob. I don't know if it was a chance meeting or a chance encounter, or if it was just placed in front of me to be great friends, but I am eternally grateful for knowing who he was. I wouldn't give that up for anything. I would not give that up for anything.
I think we're pretty much at the end. Is there anything else that I haven't touched upon?
No, that's.
Well, you did a
That's
terrific
ahead.
job.
I appreciate it, Jack. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, I'm very happy. I think we got it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate